Hi friends, I'm Jack Watson, UI UX designer, illustrator, animator, donut connoisseur, and most of all, your host for this Illustrator illustration challenge. Today, we will be working on creating a summer constellation illustration focusing on the gradient mesh to add dimension to tell our constellation's story. You can find links in the description right below this video to other challenges, our creative communities on Discord, and we've also got a link to download your free resources to create along with us, which includes the file I'll be working with today. So, our file today is mostly empty, aside from our resources on the side and a square artboard in the middle. Since we're focusing on a constellation, I'm going to start by filling this background, this artboard, with a dark color to kind of indicate the night sky. So I'm going to grab a rectangle over here, and I have smart guides on, which are these magenta indicators in the corners. If we go up to view and we see I've got smart guides checked on over here, so check those on if you want to have those snapping options. I'm just going to drag from corner to corner to make an artboard, just like that. And I do not want a stroke on this, just a fill, so I'm going to go over to here to my swatches panel and click on none. I'm going to open up the gradient panel because I want to add a gradient to this background. I'm going to click to bring the fill color forward, so that's what I'm editing. Anything that's in front is going to be what you're editing. Then I'm going to click on my gradient. So it's going to add a gradient into the background. Not exactly the color that we want, but we can edit that. So I want this to go sort of top to bottom, so I'm going to change the angle to 90. And I'm going to go and click in this color stop here by just double clicking in here, and I don't want this to be grayscale, so I'm going to go up to this little hamburger menu and I'm going to choose hue, saturation, and brightness. That lets me kind of adjust the colors here, so I'm going to pull the saturation up so I can see that we've got a color, and then I'm going to drag the hue slider at the top over to a nice blue or maybe a purple color. And this is a little bit strong, so I'm going to bring it back down here, just like that. Just kind of adding a little bit of color right at the edge of our night sky. So, when I'm working with gradients that transition from black to a color, I like to use rich black instead of key black or 100% K. So if I click out of this, I can click over to my other color stop, double clicking on that. And you can see that we've got 100% K here. I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to change this to hue, saturation, and brightness. And you're going to see that that's immediately going to change the color at the top. That's going to give us a rich black that's in the key color, or the hue that we chose. If I kind of lighten this up here, you can see. So it's just going to make our transition look a little bit better. And right now we've got a little bit of atmospheric, I think it's called atmospheric refraction going on from the atmosphere, so you can see what it would look like in our night sky with that kind of lighter down here of the atmosphere. So now I'm going to hop over to our resource link for today. I've got this link here to the Hubble, NASA Hubble to Night Sky video series for you. This is going to show you the constellations that are in the sky for July. I've just gone ahead and skipped forward in the timeline here to Scorpio, which is the first one in the video at 30 seconds. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a screenshot here so we can use this to kind of lay in our stars. So I'm going to hit Command Shift and 4 to grab a screen capture here. If you are on a PC, I believe the snipping tool is Windows key, Shift, and S. And then once I've got that screenshot, I'm going to drag it into my Illustrator file here and let go. And it should pop right in. So if I open up my layers panel by double clicking down here and open up my art layer, you can see that I've got that image in there. And I can grab the corner here with the selection tool. I'm just going to scale it up a little bit. And I'm going to move it into the center of my artboard, just like that. Now, I'm going to use this as a reference just for placing my stars. You can feel free to make your own constellation or follow a placement without a reference or use a different, image or something like that. I just want to use this today for a reference. But I don't actually want to click on this. It's going to start to get difficult to work with all of these kind of layers going on here. So I'm going to go down into my layers panel, and next to my your art layer, I'm just going to lock that. Clicking on it's going to add a little lock symbol down there. And I'm going to go to the new layer, create new layer plus button in my layers panel to create a new layer. I can double click in here to change the name, I'm going to swap the name for stars. So that's going to be the name of this layer that I'm going to put all of my little points for my stars on. I'm going to zoom in here, and then I'm going to switch to my star tool. So if I click and hold down on the rectangle, I can drop down to the star tool here. And if I zoom in, sort of close here, I'm going to start with the major star on our Scorpius here. If I drag out, it's going to create a star shape. I'm actually going to change my fill color here to be, I'm going to click on this yellow just so it's a little bit easier to see. So I'm going to drag out that star, and you can see this is the default star. You're welcome to use that. But if you hit the up and down arrows here, you can add more points to your star to make it a little bit more interesting. You can also use the, press the Alt there. You can also use Command, and holding down Command while holding down the mouse is going to like accentuate or like exaggerate the angle on these points and make them longer or smaller to create like a starburst. So I'm going to create like a little starburst shape here. And then I'm going to, while holding down Command, I'm going to hit Shift as well to keep it constrained and keep it kind of centered. And then I'm going to just release, and I've got this nice star here. And I'm going to use this star shape here, grabbing the corner with the selection tool, holding down Shift and scaling. And this is the one that I'm going to use for my main star in Scorpius. So this is like the focal point there. And then for these other minor stars, I'm just going to use the circle tool. So I'm going to click on the star tool, switching back to my ellipse. Now I'm just going to drag out an ellipse right here at this endpoint here, making it a little bit smaller, zooming in. And I can, with that selected, I'm just going to hit Command C and Command F to paste in front. And I'm just going to do that a couple of times, moving those into position where my stars are on my star chart. Command F, just kind of putting in this blueprint for my stars. I do want to say hello. We've got a live chat over here on Behance every day at 11:30 a.m. Pacific. be.net/Adobe Live is where you can join us and hang out and ask questions. If you have any questions, or let me know what your favorite constellation is. If you have one, I'm going to hit Command C and Command F again. Lots of people are hanging out and saying hello. So come on over. Just blocking in the last of these stars here on our tail, using that Command C and Command F to copy and paste in front. You can also use the paste in place command under here. I just find that this like Shift Command V shortcut is a little bit more difficult to for me to remember. So now we've got sort of like a blueprint here. We can just kind of go through and connect the dots, so to speak. So I'm going to go back over to my fill and stroke, and I'm going to swap them. So I have a stroke here. I can bring this to the front instead of a fill. And now, because I've got those smart guides on under view, it's going to make it really easy for me to connect those dots. So if I zoom in a little bit more, when I click, it's going to align to the center of that point. So just like that, I can just go through, and it's literally like if you've ever done one of those connect the dots sort of things as a kid, you can just sort of block in these points, clicking all the way along there so we can put together our sort of like our skeleton. Oh, and it looks like we accidentally switched this one, so I'm going to click on this here, and I'm going to reverse it back to a fill. I can click on my line again using the selection tool, click on the pen, click on that open point where I left off with that minus there, and just continue on drawing. When I'm done with the path, I'm going to hit escape so that it deselects that line and I can start a new one. So I'm starting a new one at that new point. I'm just going to move along, connecting these all the way down the arms. So now we've got our sort of skeleton of our constellation laid out here. I'm going to go back into this art layer and unlock it, open it by clicking on this little arrow down here, and then I'm going to click on my artwork, and I'm just going to delete that because I don't actually need that anymore. And then I'm going to lock this again so I don't accidentally select it. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to select both of my lines. I think they need to be a little bit of a heavier weight. So I'm going to go up to my stroke panel up here, and I'm just going to increase that by using the arrow key up 1 to make it 2 points. And I'm not happy with the placement of this. It's a little bit far off on my artboard. So what I can do is I can select everything on this layer by clicking on this open circle here, and I can just drag it to be more centered on my artboard so that it feels a little bit more balanced. Okay, so now we've got our skeleton down. I'm gonna lock this layer and I'm gonna make another new layer. So I'm gonna click on the stars layer lock. I'm going to make a new layer and I'm gonna name this one mesh. And this is where we're gonna put the shapes for our gradient mesh in here. So when working with the gradient mesh, it's easier to create smaller and more like uniform shapes. Anything that's got a lot of like crazy curves and stuff like that, it's going to create a more complex mesh that can be a little bit more difficult to work with. So we're going to try and make segments for our gradient mesh for our Scorpius, which is actually quite handy because scorpions kind of have a segmented body. So I'm going to come over here to the rectangle tool. I just made this new layer named mesh. And I'm actually going to click again, and I'm going to drag it beneath my stars layer by just clicking and dragging, so that's behind my stars. Now I'm going to, with the rectangle tool, I'm going to draw out a shape for the body. So I'm thinking this special star here at the center is kind of the center of the body. If you imagine this is the head, and this is maybe where the tail starts. We can sort of match that by creating a rectangle that's approximately that shape, maybe make it a little bit longer. And I can taper this as well. I can grab my free transform tool, I can switch to the perspective distort, and if I pull on these corners at the top, I can make this a little bit wider, and if I pull in, I can make this a little bit more narrow to create kind of a tapered body. Clicking back onto the, I'm going to click on the direct selection tool here. I'm going to get these round live corners. I can drag them in to round out the edges. Once I get to a certain like tension, it's going to stop me. So I need to deselect, I need to drag and select just these top corners so I can pull them in tighter and make both the top and the bottom round again. And now we can, with the regular selection tool, kind of drag it into place, sort of placing it using Smart Guide so it's kind of centered over that body there. And we can just kind of rotate it a little bit. Looks like it needs to be a little bit larger, so I'm going to grab the corner, holding down Shift, and just kind of drag until I get something that's approximately the size and the position that I want for my body here. Okay, so now we've got that part in. We need to add in our tail for our Scorpius here. So I am going to click over here to the curvature pen tool, and I'm actually going to start from where the tail connects to the body, sort of at the base here. And I'm just going to click, I'm actually going to click and follow my constellation a bit more. So I'm going to click that point there, and I'm going to come down after I've made that point, and I'm going to click here. And it might not look like anything's happening at first, like you've just got a straight line, but you can see as I start to pull, it's going to make that corner for me. So I don't have to use anchor handles or anything like that. I can just kind of click, following the curves of my constellation here, and create a nice tail. There we go. And I think this is looking a little bit big, so I'm actually going to grab the corner here, holding down Shift, and scale it so that it gets pretty close to the corners here. And now, in order to create our tail, I want to add some taper to this. So I'm going to go up here to the width tool, which is this one right here. It looks kind of like this. If it's under, it might be underneath one of these distort or warp tools, but you can click with the width tool on a point. I'm going to zoom in and drag out. And in doing so, it will widen that end point there. So we can create a tapered kind of tail for our scorpion. And I'm also going to go up here to the stroke, and I'm going to change it to be a round stroke. Go. I'm going to actually like adjust this a little bit. I'm going to click on the body, and I'm going to rotate it a little bit. And we'll make it a little bit smaller. I want these to just kind of meet, just like that. Okay, so now we've got our tail there, but this shape is going to be a little bit difficult to work with our gradient mesh. So in order to solve that, I'm going to use a dashed line. So I'm going to go over here to the stroke, and I'm going to check on the dashed line option. And at first, you're not going to really see much because this shape is so big. If I zoom in, you can see a little bit at the tail. So I need to make some adjustments here. I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to go into my stroke again, and I'm going to change this to 1, just a very small, little tiny teeny dash. And then in the gap, I'm going to increase this a lot. I'm going to go with like 100. It's going to be pretty big, maybe even like a little bit more, maybe like 120. So that gives me these individual segments for our scorpion tail here. So we can work with those. Now that I've got that all sorted out, I'm going to go up here and I'm going to add in the claws on the top here. So I'm starting with the major shapes of the body. So the body, the tail, I'm blocking in all the parts that need to follow the skeleton, and then I can go in and add the details later. So I'm going to go up here, and this time I'm actually going to use the regular pen tool. And starting where this kind of joins the body, actually this needs to rotate a little bit more. I'm going to switch back to the selection tool and rotate it. I want the head to be aligned essentially with the top of my shape there. There we go. Alright, now I'm going to use the pen tool. I'm going to click at the base where it joins that claw, and I'm going to drag up to start my curve, and I'm going to come out to where it kind of following the angle of this line. And then I'm going to drag to make another kind of curve. So it's going to make kind of a little bit of a curve to my arm from those anchor handles that I drew out. And again, I can use the width tool here, going down to the base and expanding it out to make it wider. So it's going to make that arm look a little bit wider and add a little bit of a taper. And then I can just position this a little bit off of my arm here, just like that. I can do the same thing over here. I'm going to click and drag up a little bit, and then I'm going to click and drag up just to curve that with the pen tool, changing that to a wider line. There we go. And we can kind of rotate this a little bit here, just like that. Perfect. All right, so it looks starting to come together and look a little bit more like a scorpion. I'm going to add a couple of points here. Clicking. I'm going to drag up and drag down, and then I'm going to use the width tool here to just kind of add a little bit of a, oop, this got messed up, huh? Let's drag that out. A little bit of a leg to my scorpion on either side. Right, and then I can just hit Command C and Command F, move this down, and I can make a whole bunch of these legs. So maybe scale this, Command C, F. Now we've got a couple of legs there. I can select all of these. I can go up to Object, Transform, Rotate, or not Rotate, oops. Object, Transform, Reflect, and I can choose Copy, and it's going to make a copy, and I can just rotate this copy and move it to the other side. Alright, let's switch this center part to be a fill instead of a stroke, and that looks pretty good. Last thing we could do here is take the ellipse tool, drag it out, grab this point, pull it up with the direct selection tool and make it a corner. Now we can drag that down and add that to our tail. Command C, Command V, Command C, Command V. Little claws. Alright, let's select everything here, and I actually need to make all of these shapes before I can apply my gradient mesh. So I'm going to go to Object, Path, Outline Stroke, and it's going to make all of those paths into shapes. I'm going to bring this forward, and I'm going to change the color on this to be like a bright color, like a cyan, so that you can see everything is going to be differentiated from the color of our stars. And now we can start to add our gradient mesh. So if we click on the main part of the body here, and that's where we're going to start, there's two ways you can make a gradient mesh. And the first one we're going to look at is clicking and adding points using the mesh tool. So if I click on the mesh tool, nothing's really going to happen yet, but I'm going to get this arrow, this little cursor that's going to let me click inside of my shape, and it's going to add a point. It's going to look like a regular anchor point. And with that point selected, by just clicking on it, I can go and I can add a color to this. So now we can start to drop these colors in here, similar to the freeform gradient tool, except it's going to give you these little anchor handles. So let me just kind of drop another color in here. Now if I zoom in, you can see that these have little anchor handles on them, and they've got little points. And you can manipulate these points to create sharper or softer transitions. I can even pull this down, this like anchor handle. It's going to stretch my color a little bit, so it's going to change the appearance of this. This also works with transparency, so if we select our center pink here, I can go over to opacity and I can drop that down, and that's going to make these color areas transition from that blue to pink to transparent. So it's going to add a little bit of like, almost like an iridescent look, similar to our reference over here, with that like X-ray kind of a feel to it. And then I'm going to click in here, and I can add another color stop just by grabbing my mesh. And I can even add like a little bit of a highlight. So you can see that added a white, or I could just click to add a white here. And it adds like a little bit of like a highlight to the edge of it, just to give it a little bit of dimension. So it creates like these really cool dimensional sort of points. So I can also add the points into each one of these individual tail segments. I can grab my mesh tool and click in the center, change it to that pink, and drop down the opacity. And then from there, I can literally just go through and click on each of these, boop, like magic, to add those points in all the way down to my tail. At the very end, I can click on these claws to add them there. Just like that. Alright, if I wanted to add some gradient mesh to these arms here, it's going to be a little bit more complicated. I don't really want to click into and make all of those points. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to go up to Object, Gradient, Create Gradient Mesh, and it's going to give me the option to kind of specify a grid here along the side. So you can add or remove rows and columns until you get the number of them that you want. I recommend starting with fewer rather than more, because it's a little bit easier to control. But if I increase and if I decrease the number of rows, it's going to remove these lines that you're seeing up here. And if I decrease the number of columns, we're going to get rid of the number of lines here. And every time I increase or decrease them, it's going to add more points to the center here, just like this. I think that looks pretty good, just having 2 and 3. And then I can click in here, and just like I did before, I can add in a color. I can add in that pink. Actually, I think we use this pink. And then I can drop the opacity. So we can go in here, maybe we'll do that again. And very quickly start to put in some shading on these. Go to Object, Create Gradient Mesh. I'm going to decrease the number of rows this time so that there's only one line at the center with more lines along the side here. Click in there, add our color, and then pull our opacity down. So let's zoom out and we can take a look at how everything is kind of looking. Looking good so far. We can do the same thing with these legs here. If you notice something weird happening like this is what happens from when you like expand the stroke sometimes. You'll get these weird corner areas. You can fix that by clicking on the shape here, going over to your Pathfinder, which I'm not actually seeing in the properties, so I'm going to go up to Window, and I'm going to choose Pathfinder, and you can hit Unite, and it'll get rid of that weird extra point. You can also go in here and like click on those and delete those. It's just a quick way to kind of fix if you have any weirdness. That way when you add your gradient mesh in here, you're not going to end up with any weird extra kind of points and things going on. You can just kind of clean all of that up very quickly. Alright, let's zoom back out here. We can add our gradient mesh to these. Gradient mesh. Alright, so let's say we're good with this. We have more screens. And looks like we might be having some trouble with the display, and I'm not really sure why. Anyways, I am going to just kind of export this out to my desktop, and then we can hop on over to our Discord where you can upload your file